If you like gin and tonics, you're gonna want to watch this video. That was really annoying. Yeah, I'm talking about gin and tonics. If you wanna watch, watch. Recently, I went to Landers and I literally bought their whole gin collection. I did not know they had so many bottles, and it actually confused me for a while, so I thought it'd be really great to talk about gin in general, because gin seems to be the next whiskey. Like, everyone for a while started loving whiskey again, started really getting into it, and now everyone's really getting into gin. And the number of smaller distilleries being purchased by larger distilleries in gin is absolutely massive. Just the sheer amount of choice you have nowadays is pretty crazy. A lot of people don't necessarily know what gin is or what makes a gin a gin. What is the difference between a gin and a vodka? You know, they're both clear liquids, right? Well, they actually probably start sometimes at the same base. A gin is basically just a neutral grain spirit. So sometimes, yes, vodka will be made out of potatoes and stuff like that, but most of the time it's actually made from grains. So you start off with a very basic or really well done neutral grain spirit, and then you're gonna redistill it again, adding some botanicals. But there is one common thread that reunites all of them, and that's juniper. So juniper is that distinct gin taste that you have throughout all the gins in the world, but it's not regulated, unlike wine or whiskey or bourbon, where they have like certain ratios that you need to respect. I believe bourbon, it has to be 51% corn spirit versus grain spirit. That's what makes it an American bourbon. If you have rye, it has to be predominantly rye. Same thing with gin. You need to taste juniper, yet there's no percentage or legal rule behind it. So basically, if I put some predominant juniper flavors in my neutral grain spirit, I'm allowed to call it a gin. Now, each of them will be extremely distinct because the botanicals can go from coriander seeds to lavender to licorice to almonds to citrus. You're not drawing out necessarily the whole ingredient or the sweetness of it. You're basically redistilling it, which means you're drawing out certain aspects of those ingredients and those flavors. So when you try a gin that has a lot of citrus and, let's say, oranges and lemon peels and something like Tanqueray, for example, you don't necessarily taste the sweetness of the lemon, but you get the bitterness and the aromatics of it, but not the sweetness. You see what I'm getting at? It's not necessarily getting a neutral grain spirit and added some syrup in it. It's basically drawing out all these ingredients with the redistilling. Hope I haven't lost you yet. All that came about because gin and tonics are now huge again. Tonic water, just like gin, has sprouted this new renaissance where there's lots of different bottles and labels coming up on supermarket shelves and bars, so it gets all a little confusing. So tonic water is basically a carbonated soda, so carbonated water, that has quinine, and that's the predominant flavor that you get from it, which is something that they used to use, I think, in England long time ago. The soldiers used to take it because it was an it was something that basically helped them keep malaria at bay. So it first started as a medicine, just like a lot of like bitters and stuff. These things all started as medicines. So let's start with explaining, if you were in the house, how do you build your gin bar? Well, very simply, first you need to choose the gin that you want. There are a couple categories of gin that you'll find around the world, the most popular one being a London dry gin. What makes a London dry gin? It's basically neutral grain spirit that's been redistilled with botanicals, and that's it. No additions, no sweeteners, nothing added to it. The other one that's really popular nowadays is an Old Tom gin, which I think this one here, which is called Both's, is really popular, and it's coming back. So in the 19th, I think it was late 18th and 19th century, Old Tom gin was really popular simply because they had very rudimentary distilling processes. They weren't using column stills yet, and they had to kind of mask how strong the gin is, so they would add some sweeteners to it. So an Old Tom gin will usually be sweeter than a London dry gin. And the final category that you'll find is a Dutch Genever, which we don't have here today, but a really popular brand is something like Ball's Genever, for example. It actually starts off more similarly to a whiskey. It's actually a grain mash. It carries itself pretty well for barrel aging, which gives it a much more savory and kind of sweet flavor to it. I think they're actually delicious. It's actually a gin that you could quote unquote sip. There's not a lot of sipping gins out there. You always have to kind of mix it with, either dilute it with some ice and then it becomes a martini, or different things. But a Ball's Genever I can actually drink quite clean. So once you understand all these categories, every gin is different, and most of the time they're really gonna try to tell you what makes them different. And from there you taste them and then you decide what flavor profiles that you like. So a pink gin is simply a gin that takes hues of colors from things like raspberries, grapefruit, or things that have a reddish color that are put in the distillation process and that carry that color, that beautiful color that you see here. Another example is this Nordis, which they call an Atlantic Galician gin, which is from Spain. This one's actually quite interesting. A lot of people like this one nowadays. They apparently tried to recreate the flavors from the Atlantic wind on the ocean. I don't know what that means. And it's made from a grape pomace, actually, so that's what's used to make the spirit. And then they add different botanicals from the direct area in Spain, in Galicia, and it's quite nice as well. Something more common, Tanqueray gin, for example. Again, this is a dry gin, which for me has stronger notes of things like citruses, and it's your everyday workhorse gin that's perfect for gin and tonics. So there's a lot of different styles, like Colombian gin, for example. This is made by Diplomatico. Diplomatico is this huge rum kind of brand now. So the Colombian gin, what they do, they actually age the gin in rum barrels, giving it a very distinct kind of like caramel finish and flavor, which is nice. So I'm gonna teach you very quickly, once you have all this information that's stuck in your brain, I know this is a lot. Then you can kind of combine the flavors that you want to put in your cocktails. I'm only going to talk about the gin and tonic because I feel like everyone wants to make a gin and tonic bar. When you're at home and you want to put together a bar, it's very simple. You need your gins. If you want, you could have your bitters. On the side, you could have herbs, anything from thyme to rosemary to tarragon to sage to mint to basil to kaffir limes, lemongrass. All these things are absolutely beautiful. Then you're gonna have maybe some syrups. You can make a tea syrup like I made today here. You can make a simple syrup if you want to sweeten it. It's up to you. Purists will say, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Don't sweeten your gin and tonics. But some people actually like it. And then finally, you have some fruits and some peels and some things like that. So I'm gonna show you 3 styles of gin and tonics the way I like to drink it. Starting from a very simple Tanqueray tonic. So the golden ratio, well, there's no really golden ratio. It really depends on how strong you want your drink to be. But I like doing 45 ml, so it's about 1.5 ounces of gin. I'm gonna add some ice to that. Mix that a couple times. When adding garnishes to my gin and tonics, I like to reflect the flavors that I personally taste when I drink the gin, or I taste or smell the gin. So something like Tanqueray for me, like I said a while ago, brings out notes of citruses. So we're gonna go ahead and add some citrus wheels. Not too much, but just enough to give you a great nose, a mouthfeel, or even just a tad bit of citrusy ginger as you mix it along. I also get a little orange in there, so I'm gonna go ahead and add some very thinly sliced orange wheels. You can use orange peels if you don't wanna add any of the sweetness to the fruit. And then finally, since I have 45 ml of gin in there, I'm gonna go ahead and add my tonic. I'll usually add anywhere from 125 ml to 200 ml, depending on how strong you want the gin to be. So here, we're gonna start with just 120, or you could just basically fill the glass up. Once it's in there, you wanna kind of release the bubbles. Rather than spinning it around, just put your spoon down and bring it back up so it releases the bubbles up. Taste it. That's a delicious gin and tonic. And finally, we're gonna finish with our Nordis gin. So again, glass. 45 ml of gin. You can put 60 ml if you want to be adventurous, and if you want to drink a bit more, then go for it. Then we're gonna add some ice. Mix the gin with the ice. Since Nordis is made with grapes, we're gonna add some strawberries, just to kind of have, you know, reflect those berry style flavors and notes. I'm gonna add a little bit of calamansi. I'm not gonna bruise them. I really want to just have them seep their flavor very slowly. I don't want to crush them in there. And finish off with some tonic again. I'm just gonna fill up the glass The Nordis already has kind of like a sweeter taste, so with the strawberries and everything, it comes through really nicely. So there are tons of ways to do it, honestly. If you're not someone who likes dry gins too much, then you can go ahead and make a syrup like I did. This is a tea syrup. You put like 2 ml to 5 ml, anything just to kind of liven it up for you. If you're someone that has a gin that's slightly on the sweeter side, then you can go ahead and add some bitters. So I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully it kind of helps you. I'll put in the description box below a bunch of the flavor profiles of all these gins that are in front of me, so that you kind of understand where to go with it, and a bunch of articles on what gin is, where it's from. So if you're really, really interested, then you can go ahead and kind of educate yourself on the subject. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what you enjoy drinking. So yeah, cheers. I hate finishing cocktail videos with cheers. I just said cheers. All right, whatever. Cheers. Get out of here.